Hey everyone, I'm Scott Brandley.
And I'm Alicia Coakley. Every member of the church has a story to share, one that can instill faith, invite growth, and inspire others.
On this week's episode, we're going to hear how one woman's experience with fear helped her learn how to find peace when you lean into God's promises. Welcome to Latter-day Lights. Hey everyone, we're so glad that you're here with us on another edition of Latter-day Lights, and we're so excited to introduce to you our guest today, Stephanie Francom. Stephanie, how are you doing today?
Doing fantastic. I'm so excited to be here tonight with you.
Awesome. So we were just talking, Stephanie and I were, we think we met on Facebook through the Rare Faith group, which I have told everyone time and time again, if you have not read Hidden Treasures by Leslie Householder, you need to go and read that so that it can change your life, because it is seriously so incredible. And she just kind of talks about universal laws and promises that God has made. And Stephanie is going to kind of touch on some of that today, which is so cool, which is just, oh, I'm just so excited. I love this topic, guys. I love knowing that there are so many blessings to it, like given to us through Heavenly Father's promises. I'm super excited. So anyway, Stephanie and I were talking, we think we met on the Rare Faith page. We might have reached out to each other through like writers, things going on, but we officially met at the conference just a couple weeks ago at our LDS PMA conference. And we both agreed it felt like a family reunion. Like it was like our spirits like knew each other, and we were just like, oh my gosh, we're like hugging each other. And very excited that Stephanie, you are here today and you're going to share your story with us and give us some insight into some of these lessons that you've learned. But before we get into all of that, why don't you go ahead and tell our listeners a little bit about yourself?
You bet. So I live in Southeast Idaho. I did not start here. I actually grew up in Tennessee. I lived in Boone for a time and met my husband there, who was going to, I think it was UVC at the time. And what is it now? UVU, maybe?
You maybe? I don't know.
Yeah.
It's something.
Anyway, we met there. We have 7 children, and we have, 1, 2, 3, anyway, a bunch of them that are married, and we have 7 grandchildren who are the light of my life.
Aww.
And they are the very, very best. And if you hear them in the background, I apologize. So, but they are fantastic. And I am a personal development coach. I'm an author. I am a writing coach, and I am the co-founder of Rooftop Publishing.
Awesome.
Wow.
Do you have a special grandma name?
Mimi.
Oh, that's cute. I tell my kids, I'm going to be Glamma, and my husband's going to be Grandpa, because he's just a grouch. I will be 100 years old putting lipstick on. Well, Mimi, you look like a Mimi. I could see that.
Thank you. And you'll hear a little bit about where I get my name from. Not in that, but because it's Mimi that we have some story to share.
Aw, very cool.
Awesome.
That's awesome.
Well, Stephanie, why don't you go ahead and share your story with us today?
You bet. So 21 years ago, I was pregnant with my 5th child, and I don't know why, but I have always gone late. And I was 10 days overdue, and I got a phone call from my midwife. And I hadn't always used a midwife, but I was now. And she gave me a call, and she said, Steph, I've been thinking about you all morning, and I think I know why you haven't had this baby. I said, okay. And she said, I think it's because you're afraid. And I'm thinking, okay, you nailed that one. So, what had happened is I had had some of my children naturally, and I had had some with an epidural and all of the things. Pretty much with my girls now, we tease that they can ask me all the questions because I've done it every way. So, except for a C-section. So she told me it was because of fear, and she was right. She was very right. And she invited me to go to the scriptures. She said, just spend 15 minutes and read up anything you can find on faith and fear. Mm-hmm. So we got off the phone, and I didn't spend 15 minutes. I spent about 2 hours, because once I started reading these beautiful, beautiful verses of scripture, I kept thinking, oh my goodness, there's actually hope. And so I started writing all these things down on note cards. I thought, okay, if I could just look at these when I'm in the middle of labor, then perhaps I can find that peace again. And this was the one that I landed on. Well, and I love them all, but this was the one that stood out so much to me. And it was this. It is, fear thou not, for I am with thee. Be not dismayed, for I am thy God. I will strengthen thee. Yea, I will help thee. Yea, I will uphold thee with the right hand of my righteousness. And don't you just start immediately going, do, 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 do. You know what I mean? It's that third verse of how firm a foundation. So I wrote that one down and just let that enter my heart and leaned into that promise. Okay, I don't need to fear, because he's going to strengthen me. He will uphold me, and all of those promises. And I left what I was working on, went about my day. And I don't think it was 2.5, 3 hours later that I started labor. I went from that point. This is the funny, is that I ended up at Relief Society. And I don't know, do you remember this at all, where they did the gold leaf pictures of the Savior?
Yes.
Do you remember those?
Yep.
That's what we were doing. And so we put all of those together, and I remember that the contractions were coming harder and more closely together. So like every 10 minutes. And I started realizing that my home is 10 minutes from church about. So I had to plan to finish a contraction, and I would get in the car, finish the contraction, take off, and try to get home before it started again, because they were intense enough. Kind of dumb. But I got home, and I really, this is child number 5, and I didn't want to put anybody out. So I didn't really come clean about how hard the contractions were. And finally, I had to come clean. And so I told my husband, I think we'd better do something about this. So he took the other, that would have been 4 children, next door to grandma's. He came back, and I had 1 contraction, and then the second one, my water broke. And now panic sets in. And my husband said, we've got to leave. We've got to go to the hospital. And I said, honey, okay, when my water breaks, we have a baby 10 minutes later. And I did not want to have the baby in the car.
Yeah.
So I told him, we don't have time. So he runs off to go gather towels and so forth. And I am panicking. And immediately, I forgot all about the little cards and all of my preparation. But into my mind, I heard the song. And it came back, and it was, fear not, I am with thee, oh, be not dismayed. And this beautiful, beautiful calm settled over me. And my husband came in, and he caught the baby 10 minutes later, our first little boy. Mm-hmm. And yes, so that's what had happened, was just this beautiful, beautiful calm, leaning back into the promises that God had made.
So here's a fun little fact, and this might be why we're kind of connected. I was born at home. Yeah. My mom, I was late. Actually, I was like, I'm still late to everything. Scott knows. I'm really good at being late. But yeah, that's really, I've never had enough faith or strength maybe to even attempt having at home births. So that's incredible. No. Oh, I don't know. I think it could be really comfortable. I guess I have too much of that fear, right? But that's really, really incredible. So Okay, so you have this moment where you're feeling this peace and everything like that. What kind of happened after that?
So if you fast forward, then I don't know, maybe a year and a half, and I was at my mom's house, and I don't even know why this topic came up, but we started talking about it, and I thought we'd had the discussion before, like at the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
And I began to share it with her, and I told her just what I've shared with you now. And all of a sudden, she started crying. And I'm like, why are you crying? And she couldn't even catch her breath. And then she finally said, I need to tell you a story. And she told me that my grandmother, whom we called Mimi, she's my great grandmother, that my grandfather had come to her one day and said, I'm done. I don't want to be married to you anymore. And anyway, sadly, he made some accusations that were completely unfounded. And I'm sure he's repented by now, and that's all good. But he hadn't at that point. And so within, I think, a week or two, he had married somebody else. But
oh my goodness.
I know.
Wow.
But he left my grandma, he left Mimi. And there was one night in particular that she just collapsed on the bed and just wept and wept and wept. And she was just so devastated and thought that she had a completely different life that she had wanted. And in that moment, she heard the song, the third verse, fear not, I am with thee, oh, be not dismayed. And she had peace that came to her heart. And I did not know that story.
Oh my goodness. So did you know your great grandmother? Did you get a chance to?
I did. And the amazing thing is, I don't know if we have guardian angels. I don't know, but I kind of think we do. And I almost wonder if it's a calling, kind of like ministry and you're assigned to people, because I feel like I knew my grandmother during my teenage years when I was being rebellious. Mm-hmm. She kind of hung out with me. But when I was a mother, it was Mimi. I would feel her presence. And I only met her in person twice.
Wow. I just had a random thought, and I don't know. I mean, just what if it was your son both times? What if your son was giving that message to Mimi, and then again to you?
That would have been amazing. But I will say, I just barely finished my third book, which was a family history. And in that, when I did research, I came upon something that I had not seen before. And apparently my Mimi's father, he used to bear his testimony in church, and he was timid, but he could sing. And that was what he would sing, he would sing.
Really?
Mm-hmm. So I don't know. Wow. Maybe it was him bringing it down.
That's so cool. Maybe he taught your son. It's funny because as authors, we do this, right? Like we're always like creating more, what if this and what if that, right?
Yes. Creating those threads to come
exactly. Through. That's really, really cool. Oh man. So, okay. So you've had this experience. You kind of find out that this whole song and this message is definitely something that is powerful in your family that's come forward. And then what happens? We go fast forward a while more, right?
Yeah, fast forward a while. And this last year, so 2020 was really difficult for some. It wasn't for me. It was good. But 2021, everything just kind of flipped on its head. And we've had some pretty serious challenges. A child that has left the church. I almost lost my husband to COVID. He still struggles with long haulers, COVID. Child with infections and surgeries, and just it's been insane this last year. And a daughter that went through a divorce in the middle of it all. And so I have been trying to learn how to truly lean into the promises that God has made to covenant Israel. Well, recently, I want to say maybe 2 months ago, our whole family went to Bear Lake for vacation. And while we were there, we thought, you know what, we need to have a little bit of adventure. So we rented 3 of those bicycle Surreys that kind of look like Flintstone cars. You know what I'm thinking of?
Yep.
And there were 17 of us. So we had 2 large and then a small one. But in the large one, so you're looking at having 4 places that you can have somebody pedaling, and then there's benches everywhere else. And in our Surrey, we had, me, and then my husband, my daughter, her husband, and maybe 3 kids. So we had well over 700 pounds on this Surrey. And that shouldn't be a problem, except my husband's still struggling with long haulers. And anyway, so here we are, we're pedaling, and the other 2 are going all over the place, having just an absolute ball, and we are not. And it felt like even the tiniest incline, and we're like, just dying. And I finally just said, okay, this isn't even fun. We're paying for this. I didn't say it. But I finally said, okay. And I called my son over, my 17-year-old son, and I said, we're changing. We are switching. We need your youth in this one, and I'm jumping in with your brother and the others. So once I got in there, where I had been huffing and puffing in the one, now there was this rest. And my 20-year-old son, who's in the front, he's like, Mom, you're okay. Just breathe. You just need to get your breath back. And I'm like, do you need my help? He's like, no, you're fine. So I'm breathing, I'm enjoying it. And then I finally start pedaling, and I said, can you even tell I'm pedaling? He goes, oh yeah, I can tell. Anyway, but we just had so much fun, and everybody was more equally balanced at that point. Mm-hmm. But what I realized was, oh my goodness, when we yoke ourselves with the Lord, because my daughter, she's like, Mom, this is like the atonement. I just jumped ahead of myself. But yeah, this is like the atonement. And that's what it felt like. Because when I chose on my own, it didn't matter how hard I tried. We were not getting anywhere. But when I yoked myself to my son, I learned that he didn't need my strength, but I needed his. And when we lean in to that covenant relationship, then we can get somewhere. And it becomes easy. I was yoked to his intention and his strength. And that's how I feel the promises are. When we lean into those promises, we can go, oh, okay, I can do this now because I have his strength. And that's what I learned during that moment all those years ago, and over again.
Right. That's awesome. So what can I ask you? You shared a fun little fact with me about just how many promises you can find in part of the scriptures. Do you want to share that with our readers? Our listeners.
Yeah, absolutely. So when you're a writer, everybody's a reader.
I know.
So, you know what? There was like a guy, and I can't think of his name, but from Canada, who was a school teacher. And he had read the scriptures, the Bible specifically, I think 26 times. And on his 27th time, he decided to go through and count how many times God makes a promise. Mm-hmm. And it took him 1.5 years to do it. But he counted 8,810 promises that the Lord has made just in the Bible.
Wow. That's crazy to me. One of the things that I really loved learning over the last couple of years was just that there's so many different ways to look at a promise, right? Like we can look at a promise as like, oh yeah, like I promise I'll do this type of thing. Or we can look at it as a law. And I love looking at it as a law, as like something that, is going to happen. Like there's no, oh, I forgot, or I'll do it later. No, it is like cemented in stone. If this, then this. They go hand in hand. And if you received this, it's because you did something over here, whether you know it or not, that got you that, right? And so I want to ask you, what are some of the, I guess maybe 1 or 2 of your favorite promises that you've been able to find?
Well, First of all, I have to just say, I agree with you wholeheartedly. And I feel like when we enter into covenant and we keep our side, we are literally binding ourselves to the Lord, and which means then he is bound. And we know what Doctrine and Covenants 82:10, I, the Lord, am bound when you do what I say. So I have to first check and say, am I within covenant? Am I living within covenant? And I have to do that mental check-in. But as soon as I think, yes, I am, or I get that witness from the Spirit, yes, I'm living within covenant, then I don't even have to wonder. I know he's bound. He will keep his promise. So some of my favorites, I am with thee. Let's see, I'm thinking, which one am I leaning in right this week is, I will order all things for your good as fast as you're able to receive them. That's the one that I'm in right now. I will go before you. I will fight your battles. Oh, that one during the divorce and being concerned about custody and so forth. That was a miracle in itself. I could tell you that one for the next 15 minutes, but seeing just how he will fight our battles and be with us. And yeah, those are some of my favorites.
Awesome.
So you talk about Israel. How does that tie into faith and leaning into the Lord?
So because Israel, we have this sign, right? As we keep the Sabbath, that's a sign of the covenant that I will be your Lord, or I will be your God, and you will be my people. So you have covenant Israel that God is willing to give us all if we will just lean in. And if we are keeping our covenants, if we have gone through and we've received the ordinances and are keeping those covenants, then we are his people and he is our God, which keeps him bound. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So I'm glad you brought that up, Scott, because I was just thinking about how, we have all these promises that Heavenly Father's made through the scriptures, but then we also have promises that are made directly to us, whether they're in a priesthood blessing or patriarchal blessing, even certain promises that are given to us like through conference, right? And I was thinking a little bit about my own patriarchal blessing. I do this thing sometimes. I don't know if you guys are the same, where I get really gung ho and I'll like just read it like once a week and I'll just be like, yeah, like I'm just going to find all that stuff. And then life happens. And then I'm like, oh, I don't even know where I put it. Like I have to blow the dust off of it. And you know what I mean? And then I pick it up again and I'm like, oh, whoa, there's like so much in there. Like, why haven't I been doing this? And why haven't I been doing that? So how do you, I guess, maybe not how, but what would you say to listeners who doubt those promises, who have a hard time believing that they're meant for them? Maybe they're meant for everybody else, but not for me. Is every promise in the scriptures given to everyone? What do you think about that?
Oh, I think so. And I'll tell you why. What has been my anchor? It has honestly been, well, okay, so I studied a book by Donna Nielsen. It's called Beloved Bridegroom, and it's all about a Jewish marriage. And it's fascinating because when the bride would come and then meet with the bride's family, he would come in and work out. They would negotiate a bride price, and then he would give her, and there's a lot more to it. It's so beautiful, but he gives her what's called a ketubah, which is a list of the promises that he makes to her. Because once the engagement, I guess, when she is betrothed, he leaves for a year and he goes with his father in their area, their home, and he builds a place for her. And it's under the direction of the father. And he can't go and retrieve the bride until the father says, yeah, it's good. And so in the meantime, she's away from him for a year. And you have those moments of wondering, are these promises real? Is he really going to come back? How do I know he's going to come back? And so she reads the ketubah as kind of like love letters to remember and to instill that faith and that courage and that hope. Well, personally, I feel like the scriptures are our personal ketubah because we have the bridegroom who has his bride, which is the church, or the covenant children, the children of the covenant. And that's where I go to be able to go back to that place of faith. And so the way that I feel anchored is knowing I have to read my love letters from Jesus Christ to believe he's coming back, to believe that he actually cares about me. And sometimes it's, when you consider how great the bride price is that he paid for us, of course, being his life, why would he not return? So that's what I lean into is, of course, he's coming back. And of course, he is going to keep his covenants. Why would he have paid such a high price and then not?
I love that perspective. That's really cool. Huh. Interesting. Like my mind is going now. We, here in Nevada, we just had, President Nelson address all Nevadans. Right. And it was interesting because for me personally, what I got out of it most was talking about the temple and just the promises that come from the temple and from attending, and he talked about just how, there's never been anyone that he's ever met who's walked away from the gospel and been able to have happiness. There's never been anybody who is, who's gone against the covenants that they've made in the temple and stuff like that and been able to find happiness. None that he's met in his 98 years, which, that's quite a while. So, so I was thinking about it and I'm like, I think that sometimes we get so caught up in all these things that we need to do that we forget really what's most important, Sister Nelson talked about weightier matters, right? Like how we have these weightier matters. And I think that I really love how you mentioned, and maybe you can kind of expand on this a little bit. You have a promise a week, right? Like every week you change the promise that you're focused on. I really love that. I think that that's really, really neat. And for me personally, I'm like, you know what? I think I want to start concentrating more on the temple. It's very hard because we're, 3 hours away is like our closest one right now. So it's a little bit of a commitment, like we have to take a whole day and spend like $100 in gas to go to the temple. So, it's a little bit, trying at the moment, but I feel like I am so much more aware of my Heavenly Father and of how invested he is in my life when we go to the temple. So that's kind of just a rant. Sorry, but Scott, what are your thoughts on all this?
From everything that's been talked about so far?
Yeah.
I feel like Stephanie is a very deep thinker.
You have to like catch up with her, don't you? I'm like,
Yeah,
I know. I'm like my mind is going.
You said a lot of things that really make you think about the bigger picture and just how ingrained God is in our lives, and we don't even realize it. When you first started to tell your story, I was like, where is she going? Like, how does fear tie into being pregnant and delivering a baby? But what's interesting is, as you've shared more of your story, there's that common thread that goes through, that when we put our faith in God and he can take fear away from us, and he can replace that with faith and hope.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
It's interesting. This has been an interesting discussion because I didn't know where it was going.
I'm sorry.
No, but it's actually been really cool to see how all the threads kind of tie together.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. So you're writing a book right now, your fourth book, and it kind of talks about this theme, correct?
Yes.
Do you want to tell us a little bit more about, can you? Are you allowed to?
Sure.
Okay.
It is called Bound to Him, how to lean into how to lean into God's promises to covenant Israel. And so I am going through and showing what I have learned, because what I'll do is I'll choose a promise. And when I choose the promise, then I will put it on my home screen so that I can see it. I actually put an alarm on my phone 3 times a day so that I remember to lean into that promise. And it's always answering a question. I'm just trying to figure out whatever it is that I'm struggling with at that time. So sometimes it's once a week that I choose a new promise. Sometimes it's every 2 weeks because I really want to focus on it. Sometimes it's more often if there are things that come up and I start panicking, then I have to find a new promise to address that. But I will look at my promise. I will ask myself, am I living within covenant? And what's really cool, the Lord is so kind. So yes, I might be temple worthy, but he might have a little tweak. And my most recent one was, you haven't been doing your family history. And the thing that I love about him so much is he doesn't say, okay, for the next 6 months, you need to do it 3 times a week for 3 hours, and then you will be back within my good graces. That's not the case. I went and spent about 15 minutes, and I felt like, okay, I'm right before the Lord. And then he just pours out the blessings. So I make sure that I am right before him. And then I display it so that I can see it. I remind myself. And then I'll pray, Heavenly Father, first of all, you know what my problem is. Number 2, you know what the promise is that I'm trying to lean into. You also know, you've told me that I am right before you. So will you please strengthen me to believe, increase my faith to believe in this promise. And that's how I really have learned to lean in.
Wow. I love that. And you mentioned too, you have, for any of our listeners, if they want to go to your website, they can actually download, is it 4 pages of promises? Is that what it is? Different things that you've been able to focus on. What's your website for those listening?
It is StephanieFrancom.com.
Okay,
and if you scroll down almost, not quite, but almost to the end of the page, then there's a little box and it has bound to him. It's a small selection of promises. Like I mentioned, there's 8,800 just in the Bible, and there's tons all through the standard works. Can I share why I have this?
Oh, yes, please.
Sorry. My daughter had come to me and she just said, Mom, I have these children that keep me so busy. And I would really love to start leaning into the promises, but I don't know what they are. And I don't have time to go through the 4 standard works before I start leaning into the promises. So I thought, you know what? I don't know if you call it a cheat sheet. I don't know what it is. But it's just beautiful, and it gives you something that you can rely on now so you can begin to lean in.
That's awesome. Oh, what a great mom.
You're sweet.
I'm serious. I feel, I don't know how old your daughter's children are, but I'm definitely in that phase where all my children are still at the house. They have a million things that's going on. I'm working full time. And so I guess I'm just going to kind of count it as like a little gift to me too. I'm really excited. I'm going to go download it. I'm going to see what exactly is on there, because that's awesome. I think it's really great to have a focus. I think that's a beautiful thing. So when are you anticipating your book to be done? Is it going to be a little while?
It is so close. I'm on my 2nd round of edits right now. And then, but I'm a publisher. And so I have the design work and so forth, but I have been doing all of the back work. And anyway, so hopefully I hope by January.
Awesome. Well, what we'll do is we'll make sure that when it's out and it's available, we can share it to our page too, so that anyone who is listening and who's interested in it, we can get you guys in contact. So
beautiful. Thank you.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, do you have any last words of advice for our listeners?
Really and truly, it is that God knows you. He loves you. He wants to bring you home. And if you've had those that have left the church, you have to know one of the covenant promises, and that is, I will feel after you. And he does not give up. He goes before, and he sends his angels round about us to bear us up. And I believe with all of my heart that he's working. He's working with our loved ones. He's working with us. And if we have questions and we have those frustrations. Usually, well, I don't know if I could say that so broadly. In my experience, it seems that when those have disassociated themselves from the church, it has been about the church, not about Jesus Christ. So if you can just lean in to his promises, then he is going to guide you to what your right path is. And this is where you can find them, is in those promises.
Yeah, I think you're definitely on point there with that. The people that I know who have left the church, it's always come down to something with either church history or some type of policy or guideline that they just don't like anymore or don't agree with. I've never heard them lose their testimony of Jesus Christ. So, yeah, that's a really beautiful way to focus, on what's most important. So,
yeah.
Well, Stephanie, thank you so much for joining us today and for sharing your story and all of your insight. And for really, I think Scott and I are going to have to just like decompress and just be like, okay, we're just going to have to like pull everything out of our minds that you put into there today and just be like, wow, it sparked a little something in me, makes me interested in seeing like what all's out there, what other promises are there? So thank you so much for that. And thank you to all of our listeners for tuning in to another episode of Latter-day Lights. Guys, Scott and I love being able to get on here and to give these stories out to the world. But we can definitely use your help. So if you have been inspired today by Stephanie and by her experience and the insight that she shared with us, please do us a favor and like, comment, and share. We've got tons of different ways to do it. You can share from Facebook or from YouTube. You can share straight from our page, latterdaylights.com. It's all over, Spotify and Audible and Apple and all of those things too. So do your little, Scott, what did you call it? Your 5-second missionary work? What was... Yeah, exactly. It's just a little missionary minute, guys. Go ahead and share this with someone else who might need a little bit of focus, a little bit of pick me up.
Yep. And if you know anyone that has a story that can share light and inspire others, go to latterdaylights.com and let us know about it. Thanks, Stephanie, for being on the show, and we will talk to you guys next Sunday. Have a great week.
Thank you.
All right. Bye.